We're following breaking news. LAPD has just declared an unlawful assembly for some of the anti-ICE protests happening right now in downtown LA.
Fox 11's Christy Fajardo, she's live there with more on all of that, and there is a whole lot going on.
Yeah, they issued a dispersal order about 15 minutes ago, and you can see they're starting to move in to disperse the crowd. Now, they were making an announcement up from the helicopters a short while ago. We could not make out what they were saying, as you just saw someone threw something in the direction of the LAPD officers. But the police have been staging and getting ready to move in and are now doing so. But I got to tell you that a short while ago, if you had come out live to us, you would have actually seen people burning rubber at this intersection. And the crowd has changed throughout the day. Earlier, there were lots of families here. There were people with children. We saw people also, elderly people with canes and so forth. And they've left, and the crowd is now much younger and also, as I mentioned, doing things like burning rubber in the intersection. And the LAPD is now moving in to clear them. And we're going to get behind the skirmish line. They're moving in multiple directions here, trying to keep the crowds from joining together and forming one large group. I'm walking now. We're actually at Aliso Street and Main, and the dispersal orders for this intersection as Arcadia and Spring and Arcadia and Main as well. And I'm seeing fireworks being thrown over here in the direction of the police. And I seem to have lost. Oh, there's Frank. We're going to walk across the street. You can hear that they're saying to leave. As you can hear, they're telling people to leave the area. Police, most people seem to be complying and are moving. They've stopped traffic here as well. So we're going to walk across the street because that's where we're seeing items being thrown off a short while. Behind the
Obviously, we're having some technical challenges with Christy's mic as she gets farther away from her photographer. Hopefully, the two of them can get a little closer together, and then we might resolve some of those mic issues.
I mentioned to you that we heard people burning rubber, and if we pan over there, you can see that Dodge Charger's doing that right now. You see some of the smoke that is left behind from those tires. Police, and you probably hear that. Another item being thrown. That was a water bottle. So what they're doing here, as you can see, they've deployed one flank here and another flank here, and they will often do this during protests when they want to disperse them. They try to keep the crowd away from each other, from forming one large crowd. So they're dividing them and forcing them in different directions. And that appears to be the strategy here right now.
Christy, do we know of any arrests so far?
Yes. I'm sorry, what's that?
Do we know of any arrests so far?
So far, we've not seen anyone being arrested. They just appear to be dispersing the crowd, but I've not gotten an update from the LAPD, so I cannot tell you that with any certainty. I have personally, though, not witnessed any arrests.
And Christy, we saw over the weekend that they took over the freeways at some point. It seems like there's a strong effort to keep people off the freeways tonight.
There definitely is. The LAPD was blocking the entrance to the 101 here at Aliso and Main, and also we saw the CHP. In fact, if we pan down that way, actually it's blocked, so you will not be able to make it out. But the CHP has blocked some of the off-ramps from the 101 freeway here as well in an attempt to keep people from going onto the freeway. But I got to tell you, we've been here all day long, and as I said, the crowd was very different earlier. There's lots of families, and they didn't show any real interest, as far as I could tell, in taking the freeway. Right now, though, it's a much younger crowd. As we're hearing, you could probably hear it there in the distance, people being kind of rowdy with, again, burning rubber and so forth and throwing items at the police as they're trying to clear them out. So we really saw a shift also in the energy here and who was here.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday it started about noontime, I'm going to estimate, and then it lasted until late last night. Yes, the 101 was taken over for some time yesterday, and of course that was the same day as the Grammys. You see the bottle there, looks like a beer bottle.
And as we know, when they declare an unlawful assembly, that means that right now all the protests, oh, there's a skirmish. All the protesters are technically in violation of the law right now. So that gives the LAPD the right to start making arrests if these people don't leave in a reasonable amount of time.
However, I could not hear the dispersal order, Alex.
Okay.
It was made over the helicopter, but I could not hear it. And so I don't know how many people here have heard it.
Yeah, oftentimes they'll do that over loudspeakers and say it repeatedly to try to give people time. We're also looking at the Mexico flag. Christy, I'm curious, what is the ratio we see of Mexican flags compared to maybe American flags out there?
I'm sorry, Alex, I can't hear what you're asking.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of El Salvadorian flags as well. Mexican flags we've seen. I haven't seen any American flags thus far. I'm not sure if you have, Alex, in all the coverage.
There are American flags. I've seen multiple throughout the day, and sometimes people will be flying both.
So in terms of what we're looking at now, again, that the dispersal order has been made. So it's a question now of trying to get these protesters out of the area. And hopefully all this can happen in a peaceful way. What's the main message, Christy, that you're hearing from a lot of the protesters today that you're talking to?
What I'm hearing is that a lot of people here are saying that immigrants built this country and should be respected. And we've also talked to multiple people who tell us they are American citizens themselves, but they're here for family members who are documented, and they want to speak and draw attention to their plight as well. They tell us many are now at home afraid to leave their home. And there were lots of people here today, too. There was a man who came. He was actually walking with a cane, and he brought his family who was visiting from Dallas. They all came down with they brought their American passports and their American birth certificates, but they said that they wanted to be here. And you can see police. Telling people to leave. Some of them are standing there where they are not moving. Some of them have their cell phones out, appear to be either recording, some cases live streaming this.
And this isn't just limited to the city of Los Angeles. We saw the crowd earlier in in Orange County and Santa Ana. It's officially a day without migrants. That's what they're calling this day. This unlawful assembly declared just a few minutes ago. So far, no word of any arrest, but that could soon change because, to Alex's point, now that they have officially declared it an unlawful assembly, given them enough time, them being the protesters, to take note of that, then they are in violation of the law if they do not disperse.
And we know that there is a...
I can read you some of the signs if you like. I mean, there's a woman there standing there. She says that her parents work harder than our president. There's others that say that I don't believe in borders. Others, signs that we're seeing are just taking issue with. There's one that is an anti-fascism sign. Another one that says, "We stand together, we speak for those who can't." Those are the types of signs we're seeing. We just heard maybe a firecracker go off. Actually, no, it was a foam baton. So apparently the LAPD is now deploying those foam batons. So essentially, instead of rubber bullets, they now use... It's like a foam projectile that they will shoot into the crowd, and it leaves behind a canister. And what I've seen in the past at other protests is that sometimes they will pick up the canister and throw it back at police. But that indicates that was just fired, and I think that's what we heard.
So as we know, as you're watching this, there is a constitutional right to protest in this country. You're allowed to have your say, but there are limits on that. And oftentimes, protests, especially in downtown Los Angeles, will get permits. They will work with the LAPD on a process sometimes of shutting down streets to allow people to have their right and have their say. Okay,
so, yes.
Things are getting escalating here. But then it sometimes gets to a point where the LAPD feels like it is now endangering public safety. You do not have a constitutional right to shut down a street. You do not have a constitutional right to get into a freeway. You do not have a constitutional right to step in front of somebody's car. Police have an opportunity or an ability under the law to step in and try to enact order, which seems to be what's happening here right now. And we're seeing the after effects of that as well. As we know, this issue of immigration is something that's very personal for so many people in Southern California. Most Americans do like the concept of borders based off of polling, but the topic of birthright citizenship, which is something that the Trump administration is trying to end, which has been guaranteed in the Constitution for generations, basically means if you are born here, even if your parents are undocumented, you are an American citizen. And so what we're seeing a lot of today, according to Christie's reporting, is kids who are American citizens, but their parents may not be. That is something the Trump administration is actively trying to stop. They have an executive order on that, which is being challenged, which could go to the United States Supreme Court. And that is one of the many things that people are fired up about as we look on the streets of downtown Los Angeles. And Christie, it seems like they're pushing everybody back. As we look at some of the reporters and photographers, I think, from the LA Times that are there that Christie may have just said hello to. Seems like they're moving people back. Not sure if Christie can hear us.
You can hear the LAPD officer saying we need more room back up, and yes, they are pushing people away. And on social media, on X, LAPD Central Division put out a statement saying that the incident commander for the demonstration at Aliso Arcadia on Los Angeles Street has issued a dispersal order right there at that location. All those who remain may be subject to arrest. Route of travel is northbound to Los Angeles to Cesar Chavez. So it does look like they are making progress to push the crowd back. As to where they will all disperse to, we'll see. But now LAPD officers making a run for it somewhere else.
I don't. Yeah, some more LAPD resources, Alex and Marla, have just come in. They are pushing back the crowd. As I mentioned, they're pushing them in multiple directions, in 4 different directions right now, trying to get them to leave the downtown LA area and also to prevent them from forming one larger group. You can see they have deployed those foam batons that I meant. You can hear them being fired right now as we speak. And also, we're still hearing cars burning rubber. And we're seeing the smoke from that, but at time to time, we're also seeing what appear to be maybe firecrackers or fireworks being thrown at police officers here, as well as oranges and water bottles, and also glass bottles as well. We're seeing the LAPD airship above us. You can see some people seem to be moving in the direction that the police are asking them to go to, but others are not. They're still staying here, as you can tell from all around us. So there are the skirmish line moving towards Placito Olvera, but now another one is forming, moving back towards Aliso and Main. They did manage to break up this group into two groups. You can see people on the megaphone.
Yeah. And there's a lot of symbolic value to where this is all happening. If you think about it, we've been on the move in downtown Los Angeles, not all that far from City Hall, not all that far from LAPD headquarters, as we now move towards Olvera Street, which is, such an important part of the history of Los Angeles and really the center of where the city started, and also so much of the Latino heritage and immigrant heritage celebrated on Olvera Street every every day, and then you think about times like Dia de los Muertos and other holidays that really Olvera Street has become a central gathering point for many people, especially of Mexican descent in Los Angeles, and so it is, go ahead.
Protests that we've covered, we're seeing people on bicycles, on foot, and also in cars, I should say, so that is an additional element that the police are dealing with that is not typical of every protest that we've covered. Just heard more fireworks going off. And I mentioned how they're splitting up the groups. You could see them pushing groups, one group of protesters in that direction, and then holding the line in this direction so the people that are where we're standing cannot join the other group.
And I hope the news is going to tell the real story about how LAPD started the violence today.
And you're talking about the fact that the protesters, including cars, because oftentimes we'll see in some of these scenarios that the cars themselves get stuck, sort of innocent people who happen to be driving by. But what Christie's suggesting here is that some of the vehicles we're seeing in this are protesters themselves who are using their cars to have their say.
I don't know. Well, there was definitely one, the one that was doing basically burnouts, but others are just protesting in their cars. They've been doing that all day long, and many of them peacefully. They've been driving around, flying their flags, but that's an additional element that at this hour, when they're trying to get people to go home and they're issuing a dispersal order, that they're having to report as well.
And this group bringing in their instruments.
Yes. Yes, they're not playing music.
Yeah, and all of this happening at a time where we have seen some of these ICE raids in major cities across the United States. We have not seen major raids in Los Angeles yet, but one has to assume that the second largest city in America is on the list of the Trump administration, which has said that Los Angeles is on the list, and that could begin as early as this week. So if you think this protest is big now, that may exacerbate and make protests even bigger. In some ways, there are some people that wonder if things like that might depress turnout, people scared to come out. But we see a lot of these folks seem to be proud to be out, to celebrate their Mexican heritage, to have their say in America, and to try to send a message when it comes to what's happening right now when it comes to immigration.
Christy, the police officers seem to be leaving those playing the music alone right now?
They do for the moment, and I have to say, for the most of the day, it has been very peaceful. People were just out here demonstrating, and even now there are a few that are engaging police, as we saw that they were throwing bottles and items, but there are others who weren't. Much of the group that you're seeing here was behind the police officers, and right now they're not engaging them. They're just playing music and dancing in the street.
Yeah, and so it seems like this protest has gotten a little less chaotic and a little more joyous in the last few minutes as the music comes out, and certainly seems to be less of a threat for the LAPD.
Well, the bottles that we were seeing being thrown were not coming from this group. They were coming from some that were pushed out. So they're now been separated. We can walk in that direction and see what's going on over there if you like. So we're passing. They're not letting us through.
And we know once the sun sets, which it has, and it's officially going to be dark very, very soon, things can also get a little bit more rowdy nighttime.
Yes, that is often the case. And like I said earlier today, there were lots of families here. There were people here with children, and it was a very different energy. And also there were a lot of elderly people. Right now, you can see who's here. It is much younger people in general. You can hear them talking to the police now.
And Christy, I think it's important as we're looking at the LAPD officers, batons in hand, to point out the crowd right now is a much younger crowd. And earlier you said it was more family oriented because you've been out there all day. And again, to reiterate, their message is to, noting that LA is a sanctuary city, their message is to the Trump administration.
I'm really sorry, Marla. I could not hear what you asked. Right now, there are some protesters that are asking police why they've issued a dispersal order. Some also blaming police for starting all of this, saying that they were demonstrating peacefully. And that certainly was true for some of the protesters here. Many of them were peaceful. But as we've seen, there have been some who have been throwing items and so forth. So different people came to this protest, and some of them did want to peacefully protest, and there were others who apparently, at least in the last half hour or so, have wanted to engage police, and they're still playing music.
And now as we hit nighttime, you see that LAPD helicopter overhead shining its light on this, keeping a track of it from the air, and we see the officers standing by on the ground.
And it seems like, well, not seems like it, they have split up in two. So now we have the skirmish line here. This is where those ultimately playing music and being more jovial have gathered up ahead. It was the more rowdy protesters, if you will, and those folks have been pushed back by LAPD. This is heading northbound on Los Angeles Street. This unlawful assembly declared officially about 45 minutes ago. This means anyone who does not disperse is subject to arrest. No word on any arrests as of yet. And this is, to keep in mind, this is just one area that we're showing.
Right.
I mean, earlier, the 101 was basically, there was a square of protesters around it. They could not get onto 101 because LAPD blocked off the on-ramps to 101 to prevent protesters from taking over the 101 as they did yesterday, Sunday afternoon, for some time. And that took it was an all-day affair to get that protest, anti-ICE protest, wrapped up on Sunday.
I cannot guarantee you will not have expletives. You're taking a risk.
Okay. As Christy maybe communicate.
So the LAPD.
Go ahead.
Okay, so it appears now that the LAPD is allowing this group to continue to play their music. As you mentioned, they have separated. They've broken up basically the protests into several smaller groups. There's the one here, there's another one on the other side of the skirmish line, and also on these side streets there are other groups. So we often do see this strategy where they will do that, and they will break up the protests and then gradually push them in different directions and until they get tired and go home. So that might be the strategy that they're employing now. Right now, we're hearing them chanting. They were playing music. They've now stopped. There's chanting Mexico, Mexico.
Christy, depending on your, can you hear me? Depending on your comfortability, can you approach any of these folks to hear their personal message?
Sure, we can ask. Hi, we're with Channel 11. I just wonder if you would tell us why you felt it's important to be here.
I don't want to get into it.
Okay. Well, we can keep trying.
Yeah. That often happens. Protesters are out there to voice their concern, their opinion, their stance, and then they don't want to do so on camera.
Any issues? But hello, we're live on Channel 11. Just wondering, what brings you out here? Why you wanted to be here?
I'm sorry?
We're with Channel 11. You're live on the air. Just wondering why you wanted to be out here today.
To support.
Do you know anyone who's personally affected by this?
I'm sorry?
Do you know anyone who is personally affected by ice raids?
My family.
Who in your family, if you don't mind asking?
My grandma, but she got her citizenship.
So this is something you live?
Yes.
And the police have given the dispersal order. Are you planning on leaving?
No,
How long will you stay?
I'm not sure.
All right, well, thank you so much. And the other issue we're having when we do talk to people, it's not clear that they can hear us. It is very loud out here.
Well, Christy's doing a great job in even being able to hear us, which is not easy with all between the helicopters and the music and the people screaming and the cars and the LAPD talking. There's a lot going on out there right now, and we see, this combination of several flags being on display there, and a lot of people highlighting the Mexican flag.
Yeah, so we have someone else so why did you want to be here today?
For the raza, for the race. People have been working hard. They've been doing their thing out here in this country, LA specifically, and just to get thrown out. Come on, man. Like you just. It's like going back to Auschwitz. Come on. You separating people from the kids, from the family. No warning shots. Just taking them away.
How long have you been here?
My whole life.
No, I meant at the protest.
I'm sorry?
At the protest. Have you been here all day?
All day.
How long will you stay?
I don't know. I can't say.
You heard police have given the dispersal order. Did you hear them?
No, I didn't.
They did it over the helicopter. It was hard to hear, but yeah, they're asking people to clear out. Will you clear out now, or are you planning to stay?
When it's time to clear out, we'll clear out. We're just here to give a message, send a message.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate you talking to us.
Yeah, of course, he compares this to Auschwitz. Auschwitz was a situation with German citizens who were taken to death camps where they were exterminated in the term of 6 million Jews killed in the Holocaust. This is a situation of potentially enforcing United States immigration law. Nobody is being taken to a death camp. There may be a disagreement over what's happening here, but that comparison does not have anything to do with actual history of what happened in World War II. But we understand people are emotional at this point, and they continue to wave their flags. It's an interesting choice. I've spoken to a lot of strategists over the years, Marla, who have talked about the fact that especially Latino strategists who have said that it may be more effective for people to wave American flags in this situation to prove that they want to be a part of this country instead of flags of other countries. But obviously there's a lot of pride for people's Mexican heritage. Christy, I don't know.
First, you got to get them out of government. There's another one here quoting Rage Against the Machine. Some of those that hold office are the same that burn crosses. This one says, fight ignorance, not immigrants, abolish ICE. Seeking safety is not a crime, is what one of these other signs says. I see another one, immigrants keep America running. So lots of different messages here. That one says abolish ICE.
Christy, will you confirm, are you on?
My mom works harder than the president.
Christy, can you just reconfirm your location?
For my future, now I will fight for theirs. So for many people here, it is deeply personal.
Christy, can you hear me? Can you just please reconfirm your location?
Not sure if Christy can hear us right now, but we see, and we apologize for the language on the screen. We are in downtown Los Angeles, a few blocks away from City Hall, which we see behind Christy. She's also near, she had said, Placita Olvera, which is Olvera Street, some of the centerpiece of the original Los Angeles there as well. We have seen protesters near the 101 freeway. They've been moved through the day. As we approach the top of the hour, we are being simulcast right now on Channel 11 and Channel 13. At the top of the hour, we lose the simulcast on Channel 13. So if you are interested in continuing coverage of this and the other day's news, we encourage you to switch over from Channel 13 to Channel 11, where our live coverage of all of this is going to continue when we officially begin the Fox 11 News at 6 o'clock right now.
Can we put the camera down?
And we begin here on the Fox 11 News at 6 o'clock with breaking news. We are looking at in downtown Los Angeles, where anti-ICE protesters are now marching in the streets of downtown Los Angeles. The LAPD has declared this an unlawful assembly. I'm Alex Michelson.
And I'm Marla Tejas. This is a live picture from our crew on the ground. Christy Fajardo, the reporter there, along with Frank Aguilera, the videographer, bringing you these live pictures. That unlawful assembly declared about 45 minutes ago. And what does that mean for all who are in downtown Los Angeles protesting, taking over streets outside City Hall, lining the 101? It means that they are subject to arrest if they do not heed that unlawful assembly and the word to disperse. So far, we don't know of any arrests. That could very well not be the case, though. We haven't heard officially from LAPD. This is just one slice of the crowd downtown. This particular group, though, has become more jovial, playing music. They have instruments on hand, so it's a more jovial crowd. Earlier, we saw LAPD skirmish lines, and with their batons, they were throwing foam batons at protesters who were refusing to back up. It's quite the scene out there, and I believe we have global security expert and former retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer on the line with us. Hal, what do you make of the scene in downtown Los Angeles?
Well, Marla, this is obviously it's an unlawful protest. It's not like they went out there and filed for everything to, to be out there. But LAPD is, they've learned a lot. There was a lot of lessons learned in the George Floyd riots and other riots. And of course, that could go back to the early 90s when we had massive riots in LA. But they have learned a lot over time. You see how they're controlling the crowd. They're trying not to escalate the situation. They're being very careful to contain the crowd. They want to avoid property damage. They also want to avoid, obviously, those who are not actively involved, for example, passersby or people in the area who could possibly get caught up in this. And of course, the fear would be they get hurt, somehow harmed. But they're basically controlling it. Now, a couple things to note. If you look into the crowd, that is not what I would call a crowd of young men and women of fighting age. All right, let me just put it that way. It's not a crowd that I would expect to immediately go into some sort of violent thing. It looks like a lot of people just from the community of all ages. Some of them a little bit older. They're out there, expressing themselves, protesting federal policy. So with that, that's part of the assessment. That's what LAPD has to look at, is do they pose an imminent threat? Do we have to use greater use of force in order to control this crowd?
So I don't know how, if you can see the picture right now. We've now got Skyfox up above, and we see a car which looks like it has a Mexican flag on the hood doing donuts in the middle of downtown Los Angeles, which potentially could be dangerous for people nearby.
It's almost resembling a street takeover,
right?
With one vehicle.
Yeah, and so that's now happening.
That actually escalates the situation. Now LAPD may feel compelled to step in because now you're seeing a threat to the public. And so you may actually see some action here by LAPD because they're watching the same thing you are. I can tell you that certainly I know some places in town that have Fox 11 up on the screen, and they're watching what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely watching this at LAPD headquarters, where they have live pictures of all the stations up, watching the broadcast at the same time. And so they see it. The question is, how do you respond to this? And you wonder how, just from a political strategy perspective,
Here they go.
how is this effective at making your point, at winning over average American citizen voters, if you're trying to make a point about immigration, doing something like donuts in the middle of the street or waving flags of another country? I'm not sure how effective that is in terms of making an argument to the middle of the country that you want to vote in a different way.
It certainly does seem a bit counterproductive. When you see something like that, nobody associates that with peaceful protest. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the crowd is doing here. On the one hand, it looks like they're rallying around that car. On the other hand, it might be that they were trying to actually stop the car from doing what it was doing, because it's very dangerous. So I don't rule out that there were elements of the crowd that may have said, hey, okay, everybody get around, because we want to stop this car from doing what it's doing. At some point here, LAPD will have to move in. They will have to disperse the crowd. They're just trying to do so in such a way that they can try and not, inevitably it will escalate the situation to some degree, but they don't want to escalate it more. And if you look at some of the things that LAPD was doing during the college protests that we saw, the pro-Palestinian protests that were happening, with the Gaza war, they showed great restraint in many cases. In some cases, they did not, and they learned from that. But they showed relatively strong restraint from going in there and dispersing a crowd, when they didn't have to. And if they can control the crowd, if they can get the crowd to kind of disperse itself without actually having to physically come in contact with them, that's a much more preferable situation.
And that's sort of what we were seeing earlier with the crowd that they were successfully pushing back. There were some fireworks being thrown, some bottles, but that was really the extent of it. And then this crowd where Christie was, people were playing instruments. It was more of a party atmosphere. And it was just as we saw while you were talking, Hal, as we're looking at our Skyfox camera over Cesar Chavez in North Alameda, where that one vehicle was doing donuts. It looks like that has since stopped. We saw a whole line of LAPD officers seemingly running toward that location to put a stop to it, because, as you said, now the public is a threat.
It's a threat to public safety, and that's really what they're doing. I mean, if you look at how they're arrayed around them, they've set up a cantonment area, and now they're doing something. You see how they're basically well, I'm not saying they're forcing them down the street, but they've got them going one direction. That's one of the techniques, is to channel the crowd in a certain direction. It can also dissipate the crowd energy in doing that. And, I don't want to get into all the details, but these are things that we used. If you remember back in the Democratic National Convention in Los Angeles, I worked that extensively.
2000, yeah.
We used a lot of crowd control techniques that would dissipate the energy of these protesters by doing stuff like that. In fact, one case we dissipated them by basically the crowd could march up a hill, and they were marching up a hill in the summer under the heat, and it was amazing how much energy that crowd lost as they had to do something like that.
So we're not far from Union Station in downtown Los Angeles, if you're familiar with the area. And as we know, that's a transportation hub, not only the home of trains and subways and buses, and so if protesters were able to disrupt things there, that potentially could impact all of that. We don't know if that's what's going to happen, but we're just a few blocks away from there, and that could be a potential destination for what we're looking at.
It could be. One thing I would point out, though, is this is a different type of crowd. This is not Antifa, for example, the anti-fascist, more of a left-wing crowd. They would look at critical infrastructure and disrupting things. I think this crowd, and I think a couple of the people in the crowd just said, hey, we're here to make a statement. And that's, I think, the assessment that LAPD has, is they're primarily there to make assessment. Not to say there aren't a few in the crowd that'll try and exploit it for some other reason or to do things like that. One individual or multiple individuals did, spitting Brodies in the middle of the street. But for the most part, as long as the crowd doesn't really pose a threat per se, and it's not doing something like that, they're just going to try and contain them.
Yep.
And eventually the crowd, the energy will dissipate as it gets later. I would also point out it's going to get colder, and some of those people may not have shown up with what they really need to protest throughout the evening. So sometimes these things, just basic physiology kind of takes care of itself in terms of the crowd deciding that it's time to kind of call it an evening.
Yeah, LAPD Central Division, just a quick update here. They have issued a dispersal order for Cesar Chavez in Alameda. That's right where that chopper is hovering above. That is the location where we saw that vehicle doing the donuts. So again, a dispersal order has been issued there. Also, and a dispersal order has been issued for those who remain where Christie's camera is at Arcadia, Main, Spring, and Los Angeles. Everyone there is subject to arrest. So bottom line is the greater downtown Los Angeles area is now under that unlawful assembly. LAPD just putting this out just a few minutes ago.
Fox 11's Gina Silva has just arrived there on the scene. And Gina, what's it look like from your perspective?
Yes, we are located on Main Street and Aliso, and you can see here the LAPD line. These are the officers who are holding the line. As we've been reporting, it has been declared an unlawful assembly. This has been a demonstration that's been taking place all day long. I just spoke with some folks who got here around 7 in the morning. For the most part, it has been peaceful. We have noticed on our way here, some parts of City Hall and some bus stops, they had some vandalism, F, Trump, different things like that. Also, ICE, many things against ICE. Other than the vandalism, there have been no arrests, there have been no fights, nothing like that. It has been overall relatively peaceful. But again, they are trying to prevent what happened yesterday, which was the takeover of the 101 freeway. And that is why the LAPD is taking no chances tonight, and they're making sure that everybody knows it is time to go home. Now, we've got a couple of folks here. Thank you so much for speaking with us. What's your name?
My name is Daniela.
Anita, why is it important for you to be here tonight?
Well, I've just come here to support my people. You know, I'm very grateful that our parents and grandparents, the sacrifice that they had to go through for us to have a better life. And, you know, just don't bite the hands that feed you, you know, just, it's not okay the way they're doing it. And it was never just about deporting the criminals. They're going after everyone, and that's not okay. So I think that we should stand up for our people and always be proudful and pride about our people and never forget about them.
Absolutely. And what about you, sir? How do you feel about all this?
I mean, I'm just here ready to show support. You gotta remember where you come from. Like she said, you can't bite the hand that feeds you. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people out here. We all come from struggle, you know? Everybody got their ways of showing their support.
And right over here, Joab, if you can see this adorable little girl, she's with her mom, and she does have the Mexican flag. She's been flying it over the 101 freeway. I heard both of you talk about why people fly the Mexican flag. And what I can tell you from what I've been told from many of the folks who have been demonstrating, it has to do partially with the fact that they are very proud of where they come from. And even if the president is calling a certain segment of the population rapists and criminals, they're not going to shrivel down and say, oh no, you know, we don't want anything to do with Mexico. We are proud of our Mexican flag, and that's why we are flying it. It doesn't mean that they want to go back to Mexico to live there. That is not what they have expressed to me. So I hope that answers some of the questions that you had while you were discussing that issue. But again, this is, you know, that has been declared an unlawful assembly. And LAPD wants everybody to disperse and go home. It has been a demonstration that has taken place all day long. And at this point, you know, at night, some of the troublemakers come out. I didn't see the vehicles that were doing donuts earlier that you were describing. I haven't seen it at least in this particular area, and we are at Aliso and Main. But obviously that's going on in other parts. And when that takes over, you know, it's just impossible to control. And that is why the LAPD wants to make sure that everyone stays safe. There were no problems earlier in the day. They were not telling anybody to disperse. They let everybody express their views. and that's just the way it's been. So
Yeah.
at this point, you can see all of the LAPD officers here. Everyone is just standing, just sending the message. It's time to go home.
And Gina, I just want to clarify what I was saying earlier about the flags. I just have looked at focus groups and talked to strategists over the years who have compared, if you look at sort of middle-of-the-road voters looking at a protest, and if the protest has a bunch of American flags versus a bunch of Mexican flags, which we've seen in certain the May Day protests in the past, that the protests with the American flags do better with
Absolutely.
independent voters in the middle.
I disagree with you.
I'm just saying in terms of the data.
I'm explaining.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and I see it all over social media. Why are they doing this? Why are
Yeah.
they doing this? I'm simply explaining to you what has.
Right, no, I appreciate that.
What they expressed to me.
No, which I totally appreciate the context and the point that protester was making of don't bite the hand that feeds you is true. You think about where most of the food of this country comes from, not only farms in the Central Valley and in places like Ventura County, but then you also think of so many of the people that work in the restaurant industry in the back of the house. So much of the food of the United States, especially Southern California, comes from immigrants working on it every day.
And not just the food industry. You think about labor in the construction industry,
Right.
which, of course, the wildfires, and we have thousands of homes that are going to need to be rebuilt, so labor comes into play there. I want to bring into the conversation Jim Helmold. He's a retired LASD Chief of Special Operations. Jim, good to have you. No doubt that you have worked these unlawful assembly lines before. LAPD seems to be doing, an efficient job in dispersing the crowd. Your take on it?
Yeah, LAPD has assembled all of the resources, which is extremely important before taking action. Of course, with the top priority is going to be protection of life and property. So they're taking all precautions. You see people that are equipped and geared up, and obviously we'll also have contingencies such as LA County Sheriff's Department buses should the crowd become more disruptive. The problem with having large crowds of this nature is not the fact that everyone has a right to speak their mind, and that's a constitutional right that everybody in America respects. But when you have crowds this size, you often have agitators, as we saw in the 2020 riots. And so even if you have an overwhelming number of people who are there with good intentions and want to keep the peace, oftentimes agitators come into the mix, and the crowd psychology is often disrupted by that, as you saw, for example, with the person and their very dangerous maneuvers on a vehicle. Things like that are extremely dangerous.
So what's the strategy now for the law enforcement that's out there? If you were out there, what's going through your mind?
Well, obviously at the command posts, they're getting updates from all of the respective area quadrant commanders to see if there's any disruptions in safety. One thing to take into consideration is everyone has a right to open movement of public spaces. So if there's organizers of this movement as well, they should keep that in mind, the mutual respect. You see them disrupting large streets. There's no reason they can't move over to the sidewalk, and especially during rush hour times, this is disruptive to people's way of life, and it can impede in safety, again, when agitators get involved. And so right now, they're trying to keep the emotions away from any actions, and that's what I've been very impressed thus far by the frontline staff of LAPD and the assisting units you also see from Highway Patrol. And undoubtedly, LA County Sheriff's Department is on standby if there's resources needed in the event that some of the crowd, there needs to be a next level of action.
And Jim, they learned from yesterday as well, given that hundreds, maybe thousands of those protesters made their way onto the 101 and shut it down yesterday afternoon on a Sunday. And LAPD today, they cut off access to the 101.
And that was a smart move, not only for the safety of the general public, but also for those who are protesting. You know, they often get emotionally involved, and it's up to law enforcement professionals to be dispassionate about their strategies and make sure that they're taking into account safety of everyone involved. Also, something to take into consideration is you can disperse a crowd, but where exactly are you going to disperse them from? Los Angeles is a vast area, and if you disperse them from one area, you're going to disperse them into another area. So that's what undoubtedly LAPD commanders are coordinating behind the scenes at the command post, so that it's methodical, it's systematic, and then there's a place to divert in several areas these people so they don't just disrupt another part of the city.
So we're now looking at protesters moving past the Museum of Contemporary Art, which is in downtown Los Angeles. Jim, can you talk about some of the, because I remember being on the air and broadcasting as we saw protesters in the streets in 2020 during the George Floyd protests. Some of the lessons learned from that, what went well, what didn't go well, that now law enforcement is thinking about in this moment.
Well, there are a lot of takeaways that we experienced. For example, when the crowds were allowed to become increasingly violent, and again, I believe that it was mainly by purposeful agitators, and that's a whole nother side story we won't get into now, unless you want to at another time, depending on how long this goes. But what I'm attempting to say is that you have to take out those agitators. You have to control the crowd. As the emotions got built up, unfortunately, a mob mentality starts to grow when agitators are not removed from trouble, and that's what we saw in 2020 in certain areas. To be more specific, there were some cities, and I know this because we sent LA County Sheriff's personnel to some of these areas. In the cities that wanted us to stand down and not disperse the crowds when there was actual looting and rioting, those cities experienced more looting and rioting, and those who dispersed it, they went into other areas. So there is communication among these agitators, and you cannot let a mob mentality grow and get out of control.
What are your thoughts now, given it seems the crowd has gotten significantly smaller, at least from Sky Fox's perspective, and they are just sort of marching along here? Haven't seen, you know, the skirmishes that we were seeing before. Now it just is almost a parade of these anti-ICE protesters making their way down.
Yes, and I think this is all part of the plan that's being put together, and kudos. We know the LAPD chief, Jim McDonald, who was also the sheriff at one point in time. He's been around the block, as he would say, joking, he's a friend. He's been around the block a few times, and so he has seen these type of activities. I know that he's telling his commanders likely exactly what we discussed, which is we're going to respect the constitutional right of free speech, but we cannot allow it to rile out of control, and we cannot let agitators control what some people might have good intentions for. So I think what you're seeing is a dispersal into several different areas. If you look at the crowd, yes, there are large areas walking through different parts of the city, but I also notice that they're separated into several sections. And he has the ability to call in more resources to control those crowds and make sure that they're spread out and not causing disruptions.
Yeah, and it looks like things are in a better place now than they were maybe 45 minutes ago as this crowd is on the move, but looks like it's doing so relatively peacefully, at least this crowd. We don't know if there are other crowds on the move in other places that have been separated out. As we also have Hal Kempfer with us, the global security expert who's been a part of this in the past. And Hal, you mentioned this, but I'm thinking it is the strategy that if you're in law enforcement in this situation, you would rather the crowd leave on its own than having to get involved in arrests or frankly bad images of you moving in that could be used against you in social media, right? I mean, the preference is peter out on your own.
Absolutely. In fact, what you see with the movement of the crowd right now is, you know, a number of them are going to get tired, and that is an old technique, is get the crowd moving And when the crowd moves over time, particularly if you can get them going up hills, they'll get tired, more tired faster. But you get them moving, and eventually, you know, it's night. A number of them out there are, if you looked at the crowd, assess the crowd at the beginning, a number of them out there were just, you know, regular citizens from the community. It wasn't a preponderance of young, physically fit people that were maybe looking to do something more confrontational. A lot of them are probably saying, look, we've been out here all day. It's time to go home. And so as they walk, you'll often see where they will just kind of, you know, onesies, twosies, or whatever, kind of just dissipate and go back to wherever they parked and they head home. And I think that's what you're looking at here. The other thing, too, which I don't know if this is LAPD guiding them this direction, but they do seem to be going into areas where they can basically cause, shall we say, less mischief. Areas where it's lower profile, and areas where there really isn't much that they can do, and that may be intentional as well. But it's working pretty well, and if they can avoid, you know, going directly at them, that's always a preferable situation. If the crowd dissipates itself, that's always preferable than a confrontation.
The question is, do they have an established route, or are they just turning left and right as they see fit? And how do you, as law enforcement, get ahead of it? It's almost like when we cover the pursuits, you got to strategize if you're law enforcement to sort of get ahead of it. How does that work?
Well, I think they may be actually guiding them. I'm not sure, but there may be something where it depends on how you deploy your personnel. But you can put personnel where you kind of almost create like a route that they have to go through, right? Which is if they go straight, they're going to run right into you. Oh, but I can go left or wherever, and they will move that direction. And that looks to be some of the techniques. I really can't tell from the helicopter shot if that is, because first off, it's starting to get dark, so I can't see as clearly who's on the street per se. But that's a time-proven technique. Is you just basically you channel them into a particular direction and move them. And what will happen is, now they're walking, they're full of energy, but they're probably, and you've noted this already, there seems to be less of them there than they were when they started. And the longer they walk, particularly at night, particularly as it's getting colder, the tougher it is. The other thing I don't see, too, is, and we would see this with some protests, is they would actually have logistics vehicles. Yeah. You would sometimes see where they would have a vehicle set up that would have water or other things that people need. I don't see those vehicles, and it could very well be that there was one at some point and that the LAPD found a way to separate the crowd from the vehicles. That's also a time-proven technique. And when they don't have access to water or other things like that, again, the crowd will tend to dissipate over time because they get thirsty, they get tired, and a lot of them say, okay, it's enough, I've done enough today.
And at some point, they got to get back to wherever their cars are if they drove there as well, because now we're moving in the other direction. Hal, thank you for your perspective. We're going to sneak in a quick commercial break. We'll have more on this and the rest of the day's news right after this.